Hello Year 7, my name is Mr Rae. I'm a history teacher here at Worthing High and also the assistant progress leader for Year 7. I'll be reading pages 129 to 140. Chapter 16, Run. I have good news, I told Layla when I got back into the tree, slightly out of breath. Getting back from the bowling green to the tree took quite an effort. By then there really were a lot of people. Some of them stopped to speak to me. A girl even asked for my autograph. She was quite pretty too. I thought Donovan would be jealous if I asked her for her mobile number. Layla seemed not to have heard me over the crowd's noisy chattering and singing. I said I have good news, I said louder. Layla didn't react. She just stared into nothingness. She didn't even notice my t-shirt. I was about to repeat myself even louder when she turned to me. He's here, she said. It looked as if she had just heard that someone was on their way to flatten the tree with a bulldozer, the way they had demolished Uncle John's parents' house in District 6. I frowned. Who? She was staring off into the distance again. Confused, I looked at the people in the park. I reckon there were about 200 of them now, but oddly enough my eyes were immediately drawn to a man at the back with blonde hair. He was standing on the edge of the crowd. He was the only one who wasn't singing or chatting or gesturing wildly. His shoulders were slightly hunched as if he was carrying a heavy load. And he stood with his hands in his pockets of his three-quarter pants, staring at us. Something about his face and his intent gaze seemed familiar to me. I looked at Layla again. Is that? I started to ask. But before I could continue, Dmitri Georgiou approached us. Under his arm was a rolled-up banner. He unrolled it and used rope to tie it around the trunk of a tree. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Mrs. Merriman called, sounding annoyed. George and Trixbell growled. From now on, Nature's Gift is the official sponsor of the tree at the centre of the universe, Dmitri announced in a proud voice. We're going to help save this tree. Nature's Gift is a refreshing 100% natural soft drink, free of any preservatives, or... What's he talking about, Layla asked me. How does he know about the tree at the centre of the universe? She sounded quite calm, but I still wasn't sure whether that was a good sign or not. That's what I wanted to tell you, I said. We now have a sponsor. It felt surprisingly good to say that. My dad sponsored Donovan and the rest of the first team's rugby togs, and a well-known manufacturer of swimming trunks had offered to sponsor Donovan the following year when he competed in the National Swimming Championships. No one had ever offered to sponsor me for anything. At that moment, I felt far from invisible. Dmitri, that's the guy putting up the banner, is going to pay for pamphlets so that people can force the municipality to leave the tree alone and save this park, I explained in one long, breathless sentence. I held one of the yellow t-shirts out to Layla. Look, this is your t-shirt, Dmitri. It's going to give all the people in the park one of these. Layla slapped the t-shirt out of my hand. It fell on the ground like a dead canary. Her eyes were icy blue. What's with you? I asked, surprised. I thought, hey, where are you going? Layla started climbing down. Layla, come back. She didn't bother climbing down the last bit and just jumped to the ground. Surprised, Dmitri Georgiou stepped back when she landed next to him. The people close to the tree gasped, and the ones behind tried to push each other out of the way to see what was going on. Layla started to run. Layla? Her mum called. Layla! But it seemed Layla wasn't seeing or hearing anything. She stormed into the crowd. Taken aback, they made way for her. Layla's hair was flying behind her. She ran past Killer and the choir members. She ran past the ice cream cart. She ran over the road. A car hooted and tyres screeched on the tarmac. She ran until I could no longer see her. Slowly but surely the people turned around. It felt as if everyone's eyes were burning a hole through me. I swallowed. It was as if a bulldozer had just run me over. Slowly I started climbing down. My hand slipped and I scraped my leg raw on the tree bark. There were more shocked gasps from the onlookers. I clenched my teeth. and when I got to the bottom, I took a deep breath. For a moment, I looked at Mrs. Merriman and Layla's mum. I pulled the stupid yellow t-shirt with the Nature's Gift logo over my head and chucked it aside. With my head hanging, I started walking home. New chapter, chapter 17, when everything changes and stays exactly the same. Hey, doofus, are you going to make me coffee, or do you want a wedgie? When someone says something like that to you, there are a couple of things you can do. Option 1, you can drop everything and immediately switch on the kettle. Option 2, you can point out to the person in a very friendly manner that you're busy doing the dishes and you owe your little brother more or less a year's pocket money and tell him to make his own coffee. Donovan's eyes widened when he heard my answer. He obviously hadn't expected me to choose option 2. What did you say? He hissed. I chucked some knives and forks into the foaming dishwashing water. I said, make your own bloody coffee, unless you'd rather do the dishes yourself. Donovan approached me, looking threatening, then grinned unexpectedly. Playing hard ass, eh? He punched my shoulder, but then, wonder of wonders, reached out and switched on the kettle. Don't think that just because you're going to high school next year and you spent a few days sitting in a tree with your girlfriend, you can suddenly do whatever you want. Do you get me? She's not my girlfriend. My throat tightened when I thought of Layla. This time the previous morning, everything had been different. This time the previous morning, we were still sitting in the tree. The caretaker brought us coffee. The students in the choir had sung songs and waved posters around. People had taken photos of us, and I had behaved like an idiot. Heard anything from her since? Asked Donovan. I put a plate on the drying rack and looked at him in surprise. I couldn't remember my brother ever speaking to me as if I was a normal human being, unless he only threatened me and made fun of me, always looking for a fight. Nope, I said. Donovan smiled. Girls are weird. You'll have to get used to it. He checked his reflection in the oven door and flexed his biceps. Melissa goes on and on about global warming and the forests that are being chopped down and stuff like that. She thinks you and that Layla chick were terribly brave. She calls you ego warriors or something. Eco warriors, I corrected him. What? I shook my head. Never mind. He rolled his eyes. Whatever, I still think it's stupid to sit in a tree for so long. Donovan was quiet for a moment and started playing with the salt and pepper pots. It looked like he was making the two pots kiss each other. I told Dad I won't be playing rugby next year, he said without looking up. I nearly dropped a plate. You what? Donovan shrugged. I told him I'm going to focus on swimming instead. What did he say? I asked. Even before Donovan was born, my dad bought him his first rugby ball. If the first team played during shop hours, sometimes Dad simply closed the sports shop. He never ever missed one of Donovan's games. He didn't exactly do somersaults of joy, Donovan said dryly, and sat on a kitchen chair, making himself comfortable by resting his bare feet on the table. But I think he was a little distracted by all the commotion you caused. Maybe he'll only sink in properly later. Maybe Dad felt the same way I did, as if everything that had happened in the past few days still had not sunk in properly. I guess anyone would feel that way if one morning they opened the front door and, before they knew it, they were sitting up in a tree with a girl, and the two of you met all kinds of strange people and suddenly made the front page of a newspaper. Yesterday afternoon when I got home, I collapsed on my bed and fallen asleep almost immediately. I had felt as if my brain had had enough of everything and decided to switch off. I only woke up when my mum called me for dinner. We ate dinner as if nothing had happened. Mum talked about her very important court case. Dad complained about his shop's Christmas sales, which were looking dismal, and people preferring to slouch in front of the TV instead of exercising. Donovan was rather quiet. I suspected he was thinking of Melissa the whole time. Adrian was the only one who kept asking questions about my 3 days in the tree. I answered as few of them as possible. Adrian was disappointed that I didn't ask the fruit juice man for more money. Outside, the pool pump was going chug, chug, chug. The fridge hummed like a purring cat. At the front gate, Mr. Bones was barking at the Reverend's wife, who walked past with her German shepherd, as she usually did that time of the morning. It felt as if I had been in a time machine and had gone back 3 days. Mrs. Merriman, who wore pink and missed her son, who wandered the streets, Millie and her puppies, the caretaker and the story about the bulldozers, the bowls players practicing being angels, Killer, whose real name was Joy, the front page articles, the island game, Layla and the tree at the centre of the universe, with her dad and mum's initials carved into the trunk. It felt as if all those things had been merely a dream. It felt as if something had changed during the past 3 days. Yet everything suddenly felt exactly the same again. I was so freaking lost in thought that I had accidentally made Donovan coffee when the kettle boiled, even though I had convinced him for the very first time in my life to do it himself.